I know that money can be a dirty word in the spiritual community, but you and I are going to break the taboo today, talk all about money, how valuable you are, and give you some ways to make more impact and income with your spiritual career. Welcome to the Modern Mystics Podcast. I'm your host, Alanna, the yoga doctor. I'm here to help you realize your potential as a spiritual leader and elevate your work in the realm of yoga, mysticism, and spirituality. This podcast covers all of our favorite topics: yoga, alchemy, astrology, divination, spirituality, psychology, ritual, and mystical practices, both ancient and modern. Get ready to up-level your status as a modern mystic. Of course, today we're going to cover one more topic: spiritual entrepreneurship. Now, I know that this can be difficult. Please believe me, I have lived this and bled for this dream for many, many years, and it's something that I've been through personally. It's so close to my heart, and it's one of the reasons why I continue to talk about this in as big a way as I possibly can to my fellow yoga teachers and spiritual practitioners, because I am of the wholehearted belief that you should not be broke doing what you do. In fact, I think that you should be thriving doing what you do. The type of work that you do as a spiritual leader is valuable. It's incredibly valuable, and it has been valued well throughout history. Though I must say that there have been some terrible stigma and awful rumors in the spiritual and yoga communities percolating for the last few decades that say, oh my gosh, because you're a spiritual teacher, you shouldn't charge for what you do. Well, my friend, we've got to stop shoulding ourselves. And in fact, yes, we need to charge for what we do. Most of us have invested quite a bit of money in our education. And if we think about it for a minute, there are a lot of other careers where when you invest in your education, you are rewarded with a higher income. You invest education into some kind of degree and you are rewarded with a higher income. You're invested in some kind of training and you're rewarded with a higher income. It's odd that in yoga and spiritual circles that's actually not thought of as the case. I've experienced some of this personally as a businesswoman, people emailing to say that I shouldn't charge for what I do. And many, many years ago, I would have felt poorly and probably given things away for free. And if that's something that you're doing right now, I want to tell you to stop doing that today. And here's why. When we don't value our work, when we give it away for free, we are telling the world it is not valuable. We'll see this over and over again with people who do not pay for things. They don't value those things. People who receive scholarships often don't finish the course. People who pay for something and think that it's cheap, treat it as if it's cheap. When you ask for the financial commitment from the students and people that you're working with, you're also asking for the spiritual commitment. Money is energy. I'm certain you've heard that. In spiritual circles, they like to talk about that a lot. Money is just energy. Yeah, it is actually. You, as a spiritual leader and yoga teacher and spiritual practitioner, I'm 99,000% certain that when you show up to teach, you put all of your energy into it. And wouldn't it be lovely if your students responded with that much energy because they were that invested in you? Well, that investment comes with the price. So, of course, I want to talk a little bit more about what the blocks are around this and give you some actual tips on how to do this, make more impact and income in your career. But I hope that even just with this little chat here, that I'm driving home the concept that you are valuable. And if there's one thing that you take away from this podcast, if you stopped listening to this podcast right now, I want you to hear that. You are valuable, and you need to be valued accordingly. It is high time in this industry that it is actually the spiritual leaders and yoga teachers that are the ones that are reaping the rewards for their work. It's like teachers of public schools or public education. They've been living this battle for a long time. I feel the same way about them. They're the heroes here, and they should also be valued with much higher pay scales because they're the ones teaching our young people and bringing in the next generation of smart humans to fix this planet and move us forward. That is valuable work. And to be valued inappropriately just means that those teachers are most likely moving toward burnout. And if you've been teaching yoga for any length of time, I'm certain that you have felt the same type of burnout. That you put so much of your energy forth to the work that you do because it's your passion. It's not just a job, it's a calling, it's your life. And when you put out that much energy and you're not receiving enough back, and I mean in the form of cold hard cash, it can very much feel like a deficit. Now, I remember when I was first trained as a yoga teacher many, many moons ago, there was this old school indoctrination into the mindset of thinking, I should just be grateful for the ability to teach, right? It's my spiritual dharma. It's my spiritual duty. If I get an opportunity to teach, I should take it, say yes, and be grateful. And unfortunately, that was quite the fertile ground for others to take advantage of my work. And it's not just my work. This isn't just me. I see it happen all the time with my colleagues. They feel as if they just need to teach and say yes to every opportunity. And so they do, and they are taken advantage of. People hire them without payment to do things or with very little payment. I would love for us as a collective to stop that, for us to really band together and know our value, to understand that the work that we do is so valuable. Because as soon as one person says, oh no, I'm not worth it, I will do this for free, when really the value of it is so much higher than they're giving it credit for, it devalues everyone else in the market, and it makes it much more difficult for the rest of us to make a living. So it takes a collective, but it's going to start here today with you, all right? And I'm with you. So when we value ourselves, when we value our work more highly, the people who come to us also value more highly what we do. They actually get more out of it. It's kind of a really interesting mental switch that is turned on when we value ourselves appropriately. So doing work for free, not my favorite. There are, of course, there are going to be exceptions to this rule. Charity, any kind of, work that we might do for underprivileged communities. Of course, we serve and we want to do that. But in areas or places or circumstances where charging is appropriate, then, I'm a big fan and very heartily suggest that you do it. So the other thing that we need to do as yoga teachers, as spiritual leaders, and as a collective is to take control and take ownership and really settle in to our role as entrepreneurs. As yoga teachers or spiritual leaders, we are, whether we like it or not, whether we resist the label or not, we are entrepreneurs. We just are. And we own small businesses. We just do. Now, unfortunately, most teacher training programs don't give you business training. They don't equip you to work in an entrepreneurial way in the world. It's still very much this old school concept of, just go out and teach and do your thing and be grateful to do it. When really, actually, you kind of have to do the hustle. And you have to have a menu of services, and you have to have really a price catalog of what you do, and you have to have some marketing, and you have to have some branding. And again, as much as we might resist it, and look, I would love it if all we needed to do were just go out and teach great classes. That would be amazing, right? I would love that. The only thing we needed to do was just go teach great classes, maybe serve our private clients or whatever else we do in the best way possible. And that was all that was necessary. But unfortunately, in today's world, it is not all that is necessary. We've got to put some business acumen behind it and own that role as well. As a good friend used to say to me quite often, sometimes you just have to eat your peas. And I think for most of us in the spiritual world, doing business is very much eating our peas. It's not necessarily our favorite part, but if we want to make more impact with our gifts, then we also need to do that part. It's just a part of the work that we do. Not all of the things about running a business are going to be our favorite, right? The teaching part, that is our favorite, but all of the parts need to be done. And I'd love to encourage you to think of your role as a spiritual entrepreneur or as a business person. It is your spiritual practice. For those of us who have dug deep into our spiritual practice, we know that it is not always going to be sparkles, rainbows, and butterflies. There are elements of a spiritual practice that actually are not fun. They are challenging. They are beyond our capacity. We don't want to do them. We want to put them off till tomorrow. We'd rather just do the fun stuff. That's all a part of this game, and your business actually can be your spiritual practice. I very, very much think of my business as my spiritual practice. And I know that you, like me, want to make as much impact with your gifts as possible. Now, this isn't about winning the popularity contest. This isn't about being a social media superstar. This is literally about taking the greatest work that you do and reaching as many people who need that work as possible. I can imagine that most of us listening to this podcast would love that, right? Now, your work may be very specific, and the people who need that, the biggest amount of people who need that might be a smaller amount than someone else listening to this podcast whose work reaches a slightly larger number of people. But it doesn't matter, okay? The number of people who would seriously benefit from the specific work that you alone do, I guarantee you, is a greater number than the people you're reaching right now. There are more people out there who want your gifts. And if you are interested in making more impact with that, then you do need to put your business hat on and go for it. Own the branding, own the marketing, own the social media connections, own every element of registering your business, refining your resume, going out and doing interviews, whatever it is that you need to do to reach bigger amounts of people. Now, I will tell you that I have done this in many, many, many ways in the past, right? I have taught yoga classes all over the various towns I have lived in. In fact, all over the various states I have lived in. I have taught international yoga retreats and workshops. I have taught on national yoga journal conferences and other national conferences. I have taught at some of the biggest retreat centers in the country. I have led and written yoga teacher trainings for the biggest companies in the country. And I don't say all of this to be boastful. I say all of this because I have done these things and learned that they are not necessarily, they're certainly not the best way to make a lot of money. None of these things actually pay that well. As what I would consider a fairly reasonably successful yoga teacher, one of my first years living here in New York, working at some of the top studios in the city, the most money I made on my tax return was $55,000. Now that might sound like a lot to you, right? And I understand if it does. That can be a lot of money. But for me, living in New York, it wasn't a lot of money. And also, if we just think about what if that was the absolute ceiling or max that I was ever able to make, and at that time it was. I want you to grow beyond that. All right. On average, a yoga teacher in America makes $35,000 a year, which is abysmal. It's abysmal, especially if you consider that in order to make that $35,000 a year, most teachers are teaching between 18 and 22 classes, racing all over creation. And a class isn't just 60 minutes. It's the 30-minute commute it takes to get there. It's the 20 minutes you arrive early to get ready and answer questions. It's the 15 minutes you stay after to answer more questions from students, and then the 30 minutes that you commute home. So by the time you've taught a 60-minute class, you've actually spent about 3 hours pouring all your energy and focus into a group of students and probably made very little. It's a lot of hustle for a little scratch. What I did in 2015 was move my entire business and all of my offerings online. And that was a big move back then. I was one of the first people to do it, and it wasn't necessarily the most popular move. How can yoga be taught online? That's crazy. You can teach yoga online. Well, it turns out you can, actually, and I teach it very successfully online. I use a higher education model, modeled after some of the graduate courses that I took to earn my PhD. And, if I can earn a PhD with some online courses, I can certainly teach people yoga. So anyway, that was an educational barrier that I needed to overcome. But I wanted to do it because I believed in the model and I believed in its ability to help me make more impact to a wider group of people with the kind of work that I do. Right? Because I know that the work that I do, it's specific. I'm speaking to spiritual leaders. I'm speaking to yoga teachers who want more out of their career, who want to step into this role of spiritual leadership. And I understand that that's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to dig that. But gosh, I certainly want to find all of the people for whom that is a calling and reach them. And the best way that I can do that is to move online. And this is something that I've been teaching and training my students to do as well throughout the years. I've created the Upward Facing Business Academy, aptly named, for my yoga teachers to help them leverage their skills and put their businesses online as well. So whether going online is something that's interesting to you or not, I will tell you that utilizing some of the online tools and techniques that I've learned will give you more access to both more impact and more income. So there are 3 tips I want to give you today that stem from the things that I've learned over the last several years in growing my online business to a multi-6-figure business, right? That's nothing to shake a stick at, considering that the best I could do with running around and burning myself out with classes, courses, retreats, workshops, and conferences and trainings and all of that was $55,000 a year. I'm pretty proud of what my business has done, and it's not something I want to keep to myself, right? These are things that I want to impart to you as much as possible, as much as they may be of service to you. So the 3 things that I encourage you to do, again, whether online is your bag or not, right? It doesn't have to be. It's okay. All of the ways in which you wish to teach are extraordinary and will work perfectly for you, as long as you're able to reach the folks who need what you have to offer. So the keys to success as a spiritual leader, as a spiritual entrepreneur, which you are these 3 things. These are my top 3 tips. So the first one is to find your one thing. Okay, this is the one thing that you do that no one else can do. And it derives from a beautiful quote from Søren Kierkegaard. He was a philosopher. He says, "The happiness of the heart is the will to one thing." So when your will is driving you to one thing, that is your one thing. All right. Now, it's not restorative yoga or power yoga, right? Like I teach power yoga. No, that's not your one thing. It's the way that you teach power yoga. What do you bring to restorative yoga or yin yoga or whatever your style is, whatever the thing is that you do, right? It's not Reiki. Okay, everybody can do Reiki. Anybody can do Reiki. It's what you bring to Reiki. It's your flavor of this spiritual practice that you bring to folks, whatever that may be. Now, I primarily talk to yoga teachers, but again, whatever spiritual practice you do, insert yours here because I am talking to you. So you have something special. Is it that you bring a psychological perspective to it? Is it you bring the spiritual element into it? Is it that you have an extraordinary knowledge of anatomy or physiology that you bring to it? Do you have a certain weight? Like, why do people come to your class, right? There are a million vinyasa teachers. There are a million restorative teachers. If that's not all that you do, there's something that attracts people to you, and it's likely the same thing that attracts you to the work. So it's really important that you dig deep and discover for yourself, what is the one thing that you can do that sets you apart from everyone else? And really hold on to that. And it's that one thing that leads you to my number 2 item. Okay, the next thing that is going to be the foundation to your success and your ability to make more impact and income. And the second thing is finding your niche. Right, so from this one thing, your niche will arise. And your niche is essentially the thing that you love to teach about most. So if you, let's say, we're going to teach the same workshop every single Saturday for the next 10 years, what would that workshop be about? What would the topic be? Would it be a workshop about the chakras, and what flavor would it take, right? How would you imbue that workshop with the thing that you do that no one else can? How would you teach it? And what would it be that you would teach for the next 10 years that you wouldn't get bored? Right? What would not bore you for the next 10 years? What would you still be excited 10 years from now to teach about? So that's how you find your niche, the thing that feeds you. And I remember getting this advice actually before I wrote my first book, Myths of the Asanas. And a very good, wise fellow yoga teacher said to me, look, you're going to be talking about this book for a long time. It's sort of like the way that the Rolling Stones have been playing their hits, the same song, at every concert for 40 years. They better really like that song. Because what's true is their audience will always love that song. Because that song came from their heart. And they're going to want to hear it every single time. Right? I'm still talking about mythology 10 years later. Myths of the Asanas was first published 10 years ago. And I'm still talking about it. So that advice was relevant. So write down the 3 things that you love teaching most, or maybe the 3 things that you have been most successful teaching, and really get clear on what your niche is. Because once you've got this niche, you're going to focus on it. Meaning this is the one thing that you will do, right? One of the things that we run into when we have money blocks, which everybody has money blocks, okay? None of us is unique or special. We all have money blocks. And I think that we in the spiritual community have extra money blocks because of that belief that we should teach for free and that we shouldn't charge for our services, which I've already been over is not true. Is that we feel like we have to say yes to everything and be a jack of all trades. Because we are kept so impoverished, I mean, let's be real, the yoga industry, the spiritual community was not developed to honor and value the yoga teacher or spiritual leader. It just wasn't. Not as it is now here in the modern Western culture, right? If it had developed to honor and value the yoga teachers would be faring a lot better financially, but they're not. So we have to fend for ourselves a little bit, and we have to rewrite this model individually. But in the meantime, I just want you to fight that battle that may come up for you around niching down and figuring out this one thing that you do, the one thing that your heart calls you to do, the one thing that you could teach about for the next 10 years, and really staying clear on that. Now, I'll give you a personal example. So for many years, I led teacher training. And for many years, I led every single aspect of teacher training. Now, on one hand, that was great training for me. It really drove in the education and information of yoga that, otherwise I may have forgotten had I not been using it so consistently to constantly teach these teacher trainings. But the reality is I don't like teaching anatomy, right? I don't like it. Confession. It's not my thing. I understand its place. I know a ton about anatomy because in yoga you have to move the body in weird ways, and anatomy is critical, but gosh, I'm not passionate about it and I don't want to teach it all the time. And yet I was consistently being asked to just teach anatomy workshops for weekends, for studios over the weekends. And I would say yes, because what happens if I said no? If I said no to that opportunity, would they ever ask me again? And I'd lose out on that money. But boy, my heart wasn't in it. And I'll bet that listening to this, that may resonate with you in some way, that you're saying yes to opportunities or teaching things that actually aren't where your heart is at. And I am going to tell you with absolute certainty that your success will come most assuredly when you are doing what your heart wants. Now, I know that sounds terribly cliche, but you're going to do whatever it is that you do more powerfully, more passionately, more resonantly when you're doing what you love, when you're putting out there and teaching that thing that you do, that niche. And when you're the only person who does that, right, and somebody needs that, who are they going to call? So let's say you are the anatomy expert. If you focus on that, if you make clear to the world that this is your niche, this is the thing that you do, when someone needs an anatomy expert, who's the first person they're going to call? You. You've identified that as your niche. You've stated that. You've shouted it from the rooftops. They're not going to think of you if you do everything. Right? Jack of all trades, master of none, as the saying goes. I mean, you might master them all, but they might not all be your favorite. So there is incredible power, value, and impact in finding your niche and truly, truly sticking to it. So that's my step 2. My step number 3 is to this is what I call it, build a mountain. You want to build a mountain of offerings that stem directly from your niche. So essentially, you want a way for people to gain easy access to you and your niche and what you do. And that might be classes. If you're online, that might be a free download or a video, or maybe you have a YouTube channel, putting some stuff on a YouTube channel that always points back to your niche. You cannot stray from that niche. Let this be this lesson for the day. Because again, you want to establish that as your expertise so that becomes your truly valuable thing. And then you want to have a way for people to move up that mountain with you. We're trying to get people to the peak of the mountain. We're ascending people's consciousness, right? So we're trying to get them up the mountain with us. So we allow them to gather at the base of the mountain with something simple: classes, workshops on Saturdays, free downloads, videos. And then we have another step up that is a little bit more expensive, right? They have to buy in a little bit more, but the people who gather at the base of the mountain and fall in love with what you do, they're going to happily buy that next thing. They're going to happily invest in their spiritual transformation with you because they've learned through that first step that you're the absolute person to help them with their spiritual evolution. They can't wait to buy that next step. They can't wait to do the next thing. Maybe it's a 5-day immersion. Maybe it's a retreat. Maybe it's an online course. And then the final pinnacle of that mountain, the very top of that mountain, is something super exclusive and a little more pricey. And it may, be maybe scary pricey in some of our minds, but I'm thinking a couple of $1,000s, like a teacher training or some kind of certification program, or maybe a destination retreat where they have to go to a foreign country with you, or some type of long-term training or coaching or mentorship, where those who have gone up the previous steps of the mountain with you, they just can't get enough. Right? But that's not the totality of your offering. You have a real, true gift, and it's this pinnacle of the mountain where people get all of the best of you. But every step up, from the bottom to the middle to the top of the mountain, every step up, they're getting a piece of that best of you, and it's all very clearly in alignment with your niche. Now, interestingly enough, I received this advice to niche down very early in my yoga career, all right, almost right at the beginning of my yoga career, and it was terrifying. And I didn't do it. I was sitting at I was actually at a wedding, and next to me, of course, they seated the two yoga teachers at the wedding together, obviously. But the woman next to me was a much more accomplished, very well-known yoga teacher, and I was so excited to sit next to her, and I felt so small and insignificant, and I asked her for her best piece of advice. And this was the best piece of advice that she gave me nearly 20 years ago. Had I listened, I would have saved myself so much heartache and made so much more money, but I didn't listen because I was afraid to turn down all those other opportunities. I was afraid to not be an expert at everything. But I can tell you now, on the other side, that this is where your greatest power, your greatest impact, and your greatest potential for income lies. So, my friend, I hope that this has been both inspirational as well as informational for you and given you some things to think about and actually pursue and do as a spiritual entrepreneur. Time to put on confidently your entrepreneurial hat and be the business person that you are, that helps you to carve out your space, establish your expertise, and make more impact and income in the world. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you want to continue this discussion, I am talking about this specific thing this month in my highereducation.yoga membership. We're actually speaking about coming to grips with making an impact and income. And a lot of the folks inside of the group are chatting about exactly this. So if you want to meet fellow folks, both struggling and succeeding in this realm, turning their businesses into thriving spiritual careers, then please join us. I offer you a $1 14-day trial. If you go to highereducation.yoga/trial, you can check it out and join us in the membership. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to leave a review wherever it is that you downloaded this podcast, and it will help others to find it too, because we want to gather as many people as possible on this trail of spiritual leadership because folks need us today. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I look forward to speaking to you on my next podcast. Until then, namaste.